If you're looking to build an awesome React portfolio website, you come to a perfect place. In this tutorial, I will show you how to build a breathtaking website with advanced animations using various techniques like GSAP library, Animate.css and custom CSS animations. Together, we will add a Pacman page loader. Also, I will show you how you can create and implement contact form using only email.js library without a need to set up a server. And you will learn to implement maps on your website and much more. Sounds interesting? Please join me.
Wait for me!
First thing first, let's create React application using npx create React app and pass in the name of the application. In this case, it's React Portfolio. It will install all the packages that you need for React application. After project installation is done, we want to change directory to the project itself. And first, let's install all the packages that we're going to be using so that we can later focus only on coding and not installing. The first package is email.js, which we'll be using to implement the contact form. So type in npm i email.js/browser. The next package is for our font icons. So it's @fortawesome/freebrands SVG icons. And we're going to install a couple of these font icon versions. After done, clear the console. And the next one is fortawesome/freesolid SVG icons. So we're going to use the free packages for fonts. Solid icons are going to be used for the navigation on the left side. The next package is fortawesome/react-fontawesome. This is a wrap-up for the font awesome, so you can use it easily on React. The next one is Animate.css. It's a CSS library for animating the objects and fonts. It's really cool, you'll see it. Now, for more advanced animations, we're gonna use GSAP. I'm installing GSAP trial as I didn't want to create any account. Next package is loaders.css. It's a package for loaders, right? So we're gonna add a Pacman in between the pages on our application. You'll see it's really cool. The next one is React-leaflet. So on our context page, we're gonna have a map. And this is a wrap app library for using leaflet maps. The next package is React-loaders. We installed the loaders.css previously, and this is for React integration. So it's really easy to use the loaders inside of the React. The next one is the standard package inside of the React. It's React-router-DOM. So as we're going to have 3 pages in our application, this is going to help us to navigate through. And for styling, I'm going to be using the Sass, as it helps you to write less code and to use some of the operations like for and variables. And we are finally done with installing the packages. And now I want to open the project that we just created inside of the Visual Studio Code. The first thing that I want to add inside of my root folder is prettier configuration file. And name of the file is .prettierrc. I'll let this plugin worry about the formatting, and I'm gonna worry about the coding and focus on. And the default settings that I set up is that trailing commas are going to be enabled, tab width is going to be 2. I'm gonna remove the semicolons and add a single quotes. Also, as we are going to be using SCSS, I want to update the app file and also update the import inside of the app component. So instead of the app.css, add just S to be Sass extension. Now let's define some of the global styles inside of our app.scss file. I'll define primary color to this yellow FFD700. It's used inside of the Animate.css library, so it's needed in order to use it. Then import the Animate.css. And let's define the font faces that we're going to be using. And default font is going to be Helvetica New. And let's enter the URL of the font, which is going to be inside of the assets folder, inside of the fonts folder, and the name of the file is helvetica-new.ttf. And format, let's add TTF. Now let's add the assets folder to our project. And inside of this assets folder, we're gonna have images and fonts. And I'm gonna put the link to the assets folder in the description so that you can build entire and same application as I'm doing here. So, okay, we have the assets folder now. Let's link it inside of our app.css file, the rest of the font families. I'll just copy paste the first font face 3 times as we're gonna use 3 fonts. The next font is going to be named Label Aurore. We're gonna use this font for styling the tags on our background. Very nice font. And the name of the file is label aurore with camel case, and the format is WAV2. And the last font is going to be Helvetica. And the file name is going to be Helvetica RG for regular dash regular. And format is going to be again WAV2. And we're done with the font faces. And now I just want to add a default font for input and text areas. So I'm going to be using font family Helvetica New. Now let's just start our application to see does it work and have we break anything until this point. So run npm start from the console. And we have our app up and running. Now the next thing which I want to do is inside of the index.css file, I want to remove some of the predefined styles to the code and to change the font family. First, I'll define HTML selector and I'm gonna set the font size to 62.5%. For body, let's set the 300 as a font weight, 11 as a font size pixels, and 1.4 as a line height. And the default font should be Helvetica New. As a fallback font, we're gonna use sans serif. For the color, put the 444. And for the background color, the hash code is 022C43. Put the overflow to hidden and a display block. And those should be the default values for a body tag. Okay, now let's open up a index.js file and close all the other files. And inside of the index.js file, I want to import browser router module and wrap our application around it. This provides us with the ability to use the routes inside of our application. Next, we can open up the app.js file, and this is the file where I'm gonna be defining our routes. So remove the boilerplate code and import the routes from React Router DOM. Next, import a single route and place it inside of the routes. Here we're gonna define the first path, which is going to hold the layout component. And we're gonna create that just in a second. So the element is going to be a layout, but as we don't have this component yet, let's create it. First, I want to create a components folder for all our components, and I'm gonna place that inside of the source directory. Now, inside of the components, let's create a new folder and name it as a layout. Obviously, I'm gonna place layout component there. Then, inside of that layout folder, add a new file and call it index.js. It's easier for later on imports. And add index.scss file. So this is going to be the pattern that we're going to use for all of our components. And the first thing that we want to import inside of our index.js file is our SCSS file, so that we don't forget it later on. All of our components are going to be functional components. So I'm going to follow the same pattern for every single component. Const name layout is equal to arrow function. Here we're just going to create a boilerplate code so that we can import it inside of our app file and export default layout. Now we can remove the logo, which is from boilerplate code, and import our layout component. And let's save it and preview it. And we haven't imported the route, so let's do that. And now as we can see, it works correctly. So we set up our first component and our first route. We can start building our layout. First, we're gonna build left sidebar. So inside of the components folder, create another folder named sidebar. Inside of this folder, we wanna create index.js file and index.scss file. Same as we do for other components. Close other files so they are not confusing us. And the first thing that I always do is to import styles on top of our index.js file. And now let's create a sidebar dummy component so that we can import it inside of the layout. So add const sidebar equals a dummy fat arrow function and export default sidebar. And just put the text hello from the parentheses. And now we can import that inside of the layout and continue building. So inside of the layout index.js file, instead of the hello, just import the sidebar component. And we have connected that, as you can see. Remove this dummy text, and inside of the parentheses, we want to add a div with a class name of a navbar actually. Inside of the navbar, import the link from React router DOM and edit a name, class name logo. And this is going to be a default home page. So 2 is going to route to the slash to home page. Inside of the logo, we want to obviously display the logo. So add the image with the source. And let's import the logo S for Slobodan or Sloba. So import logo S from assets folder, images, and the name of the file is logo-s.png. Place the image inside of the source file and add alt attribute as a logo. Now we want to duplicate the image and import that new image as well. As we're going to have 2 images. One is going to be S and the other one is going to be rest of my name underneath of it, Slobodan. So let's import both of these and let's add to second image, logo subtitle, as it's like a subtitle to our logo, and update the L to Slobodan. We can't even see our images on the page as they're too large and they're overflowing our page. So let's add some styles inside of the index.scss file. Add a class name of navbar, and inside of it, set the background to 181818. It's very dark background. Set the width of 60 pixels. Height is going to be 100%. Position absolute. Top left z index 3. Set the minimum height to 500 pixels because on the smaller screens we don't want to get the overflow on our container and it's better to have some scroll bar. So for our logo container, set the display to block and put the padding on top and bottom to 8 pixels. For left and right, let it be 0. And for the image itself, set the display to block and margin to 8 pixels auto, so it's centered. Width to 24 pixels, and now we can finally see it completely. Set height to auto. And for our second image, we want to set the subtitle logo and set the width to 50 pixels. But I think that we forgot to add a subclass, so let's do that. Add a class name to our sub logo and it should work now. And that's our home logo image only. So below that, we want to add navigation with the links to every single page that we have. So add a nav tag, and inside of the nav tag, add the nav link. First nav link is going to be our home page. So set the exec to true, active class name to active, so that it helps us to style the active link. And 2 is going to be slash. Inside of our nav link, import the font awesome icon. And for the icon, set the home. It's gonna display nice little home. For the color, we want this gray color, 4D, 4D, 4E. And it's gonna be used for all our icons. As you can see, we got the small house in our sidebar. Now let's copy paste it 3 times. Next link is going to be about section. So for the icon, import user and put the route to about. Also, we will need a class so that we can actually add the content on hover. So add the class name about-link. For a third icon, it's going to be FA envelope, which is going to be a contact page. So add a class name of contact link and add to /contact. We have our navigation now, but it doesn't work and it also doesn't look nice. So let's add some styles. Go inside of the index style file and add the nav tag. Inside of the nav tag, add these properties. Set the display to block. Text align it to center. Position absolute. Set the height to 210 pixels. And we want to position our nav in the middle, so we need to set the top to 50%. And on top of that, we want to give a negative margin of minus 120 pixels. Set the width to 100%. And for the links, add a font size of 22 pixels. And set the color to 4D, 4D, 4E, which is a gray color. Set the display to block and set the line height to 51 pixel. Height is going to be the same, 51 pixel, and set the position to the relative. You can see now how it's laid out. And the last thing for nav links, we want to remove the text decoration. So set the text decoration to none. Now let's add some transition to our links. So for the I, set the transition for all the elements 0.3 seconds ease out. And on hover, we want to set the color of our links to yellow. And SVG, we want to set opacity to 0. So as you can see, when we hover over the SVG icon, it disappears. But we want to add the content now. So instead of the logo, we see the text. So set the after opacity 1. Now for all of our after elements, we want to set some default values. Set the content to empty string, font size to 9 pixels. Set the letter spacing to 2 pixels. For the position property, we want to set an absolute value. Bottom set to 0. We want to set a display block and a width of 100%. Text align to center. And we want to set the initial opacity to 0 so that we can fade in. In order to have a smooth transition, we need to add transition property. For all, set to 0.3 seconds as ease out. And now let's alter the content. For the first child, set the content as home. And as you can see, when we hover, we get the home text. We can do the same for the rest of the links. We can target them using the classes, as we added the class name. Use the about link to target the second element, and for the after, set the content for about. And as you can see, we have the about link as well now. So we can just copy paste our about link, and we can update the about to contact. So let it be contact link, and for the contact to be contact. And now we have all the links and text on hover. And the last thing that is left to be done in this section is to add the active class to our active route link. So add the active class and set the SVG to this yellow color. As we are on the home page, the active class gets activated on the first link and we are getting active class. So we get this beautiful yellow color. The last part that we want to add to our nav bar is to add the links to our outside accounts and the profiles like YouTube, GitHub, LinkedIn, and similar. Having that in mind, I'll add unordered list. Inside of the list, I'll add li tag with an anchor tag. Again, we're going to use the icons for our links. So the first one is going to be font awesome. For the icon, I'm going to set the LinkedIn. The color is going to be the gray color as we use for our top navigation as well. The target for it is going to be blank, so we want to open the links in the new page. And we want to set the rel as well. For the href, I'm just going to paste the link to my LinkedIn account, but obviously you will use yours. And just to test if the link works correctly, I can open up my page. Let's close it. Now we can just copy paste over the link that we just created and update the icons for others and the links. For the second one, I'm going to use the GitHub. So the icon is F GitHub, and I'm just gonna paste in the link to my GitHub account. The next link is linked to the YouTube channel. So add the FA YouTube icon, and I'm gonna put the link to my YouTube channel here. If you don't have a YouTube account, obviously, you're gonna remove this icon. The last link that we're gonna navigate to is the Skype. So add the FA Skype icon and update the href with the Skype prefix. After the prefix, you want to add a Skype username. Everything else is the same. So now that we linked all of our accounts, we can style them to look nicely. First element that we want to target is our unordered list. So set the position to the absolute, and we want to place it on the bottom of our screen. So bottom position 20 pixels. Width is going to be 100%, and we want it to be displayed as block. Also set the padding to 0. List style to none, we want to remove the bullet points, and align the text to center. Set the margin to 0 as well. The next we want to style our anchor tags inside of the list items. So set the padding on top and bottom to 7 pixels, and the left and the right side to 0. We want to display them as a block, and to give it a font size of 15 pixels. Set the line height to 16 pixels. And the color actually we don't need, as that is set on the icon itself. And when we hover over our links, we want to set the color to be yellow, same as we have on our nav links as well. But we want to do that on the SVG, so add SVG there please. And if we hover over, we can see that we have nice yellow color. And that makes our layout complete on the left side. Let's continue with our home page. But one thing I noticed that if we hover over our nav links, you can actually see that the font isn't applied. This is a default font. And if you go to the index.css file, we can see that I used font family, which is used for a font name, not for the all properties of the font itself. If we save that, we can now see that the font is actually being applied. So please fix this error if you're following along. Before starting with the content of the home page, I want to add some of the elements that are going to be used across our application. These elements are going to be placed in the background, but they're going to add the feel of a web developer because we're going to display on top HTML and body tags and on the bottom as well. So inside of the layout folder and index.js file, we want to add a class name with an app. So this is going to be the main wrapper of our application. And we want to add a class name of page. And inside of this element, I will set an outlet where we will render all the pages in our application, which will be like a placeholder. So import the outlet from React Router DOM. Before the outlet, I already inserted top tags with body tag. Now I want to do that for the bottom as well. So we will import the body tags and we will add a class name of tags and bottom tags. And inside of it, I want to paste in the body code, add the break line and add the HTML tag as well. So add a class name of bottom tags HTML so that we can move it slightly and make a difference of the body tags. Now I just paste in the code of the HTML tags that I copied over from the web. And who really can remember those characters? Now let's add some styles to our tags. Open up the index.scss file. Let's set the width and the height of the page. Set for both of these to 100% and set the position to be absolute. For our top tags, we want to set bottom position to be set as auto, and for top we want 35 pixels. For our tags general class, set the color to be this yellow default color that we use across our application. But I just want to reduce the opacity by a bit, so set it opacity 0.6. Position will be absolute and bottom will be set to 0. Left is going to be 120 pixels. Set the font size to 18 pixels. And finally now we can see our body tags and what we are coding actually. Set the font family to a Label Aurore, this nice font which will give such a good styling to our body tags. And for our body tag HTML, I want to add -20 pixel indentation so that we actually have that feeling of the real code. As we have our main layout set up, we want to create a home page finally. So inside of the components folder, add a home folder. Inside of the home folder, as always, add index.js file and index.scss file. We want to create just a dummy home component so that we can import that inside of our router. Const home equals hello and export default home. Next, we can import our home component inside of the app.js file. So add a new route with a path of, actually, you don't need a path, we just set it as an index. And element is going to be the home component. Now we can bring in some content into our home page. Let's do that. Open up index.js file inside of the home folder and remove the implicit return. Inside of the curly braces, I will add a return. And inside of the return, let's add a div. Div with a class name of container and a class name of homepage. Inside the container, I will add a text zone div. This div will contain the animated text on the left side of our screen. In the text zone, add the h1 title. And inside of the title, add the following text. Hi, comma, then we will add a break, I'm, and after that, it should say, hi, I'm Slobodan. For the first letter of my name, I will use an image, which will be styled differently. So let's add an image tag, and for the source, we're going to import the image later, and for the alt tag, add the developer. Image is going to be exactly the same as we use on the left sidebar. So let's import it. Import logo title from the assets images, and the file name is logo-s.png. And now just place the logo title inside of the source attribute. Okay, this is linked properly, but it lacks some styling as you may see. Let's continue with building our page. Below the image, let's add the rest of the word, Slobodan. With S, it's going to be my name, Slobodan. And add the break. And below, it's going to say web developer. And we actually need to surround all the text that we've written inside of the H1 title, not just the first two words. Below this, I will add H2 title. First, I said who I am. Next, I want to say what I do, so it's very visible once somebody lands on your first page. So I'm a front-end developer and JavaScript expert. And also, I create YouTube content as well. And below that, we want to add a link button. So this will link to our contact page so that actually somebody can contact you in case he has a project for you, full-time job, collaboration, or he just wants to say hello. 2 is going to be /contact, and we're going to add this to our route later on. And class name, add a flat button so that we can style it. Now, open the index.css file inside of the layout folder. The styles that we're going to add here are going to be the same for every single page, so we don't want to duplicate them. Let's put them inside of the layout and it will be applied to all the pages. Set the width to be 100%. We'll change the contents, height to 90%, min height to 566 pixels. Set the position to be absolute and the opacity to be 0. Container will have fade-in animation, that's why the opacity needs to be 0 at the beginning. Set the top to be 5%. Margin 0 auto. Z index to be 1. Transform style, preserve 3D. And animation, fade in. This is the animation from Animate.css. Duration is 1 second and let it end forwards. Add the animation delay to 1 second. And the rest of the styles we're gonna place inside of the index.css file in our home folder. Inside of our index.js file in the homepage folder, import our index.css file. Now we can open our style file. And on top of our file, let's add the first class, homepage. Inside of that homepage, we want to target H1 tag. And inside of the H1, we have an image that is overlarged. So put the size to 32 pixels. And we can finally see the rest of the H1 title. So target the text zone and position it absolute. For the left position property, put it as a 10% so that we can see it and it's not positioned below the sidebar. Put it top 50% as we want this to be centered. As I want our text zone to be in the dead center, add the transform translate Y property and put the -50% so it moves the text zone a little bit on top. The width is going to be 40% as we're going to have a 60% of the other elements on the right side. And the max height is going to be 90%. Next, let's add some styles to our title. First, put the color to be white. And you can see how that stands out now. And let's increase the font size to 53 pixels so it's nice and visible. We want this to stand out when somebody lands on our index page. Put the margin to be 0. And for the font family, put the Helvetica. And for our weight, I just want it slightly to be less bold. So the font weight is going to be 400. As I want this portfolio to give the user feeling that he's on a developer portfolio, I want to add H1 tags around our titles. Similar what we did for the body and HTML tag. So we're gonna do that with the before and after of the title. Use the content H1. For the font family, again, we're gonna use Label Aurora. And color is going to be yellow. Font size, we want to reduce it to 18 pixels. Set the position to absolute. As I want this tag to be slightly on top of our title, put the margin top of -40 pixels. And place the slight indentation. So left is going to be 15 pixels. And just to fade out a little bit, so the opacity is 0.6. Now let's do the similar for the after as well. So content is going to be closing H1 tags without the space. Font family is going to be the same. Label Aurora. Most of the properties are going to be the same for the H1 before and H1 after. Color is going to be the yellow. The font size is going to be 18 pixels. The position is going to be an absolute. Set the margin top to 18 pixels, margin left to 20 pixels, and we want this to animate along with the text. So put the animation fade in 1 second and delay 1.7 seconds, and backwards for the fill-in mode. And for the opacity is going to be the same, 0.6 as for the before. Let's reload the page to see our fade-in animation. That's much better. Let's style the rest of our text zone. For the S letter inside of our text, let's add a little bit of space on the left side. So put the margin left of 20 pixels. Set the opacity of 0 because we will be adding the fade-in animation, actually the rotation animation. Height is going to be auto and the animation is going to be rotate in. 1 second long, linear and fill-in mode both. And for the animation delay, I will add 1.4 seconds as we want this animation to start a little bit after, as we are going to be add some of the loaders later on. Now we can move on our subtitle. Set the color to be AD hash code. Set the margin top to 20 pixels. Font weight to 400. Font size it's going to be 11 pixels. For the font family, let's use good old sans serif. And I want to spread the letters out, so set the letter spacing to 3 pixels. And we will be animating the H2 as well, so put the animation as fade in, 1 second long, 1.8 seconds delay, and set the fill-in mode as backwards. The last but not the least is our contact button, so use the flat button class that we use inside of our JSX. Set the color to be this default yellow color, font size to 13 pixels. Font weight to be 400. For our button, I want letter spacing to be 4 pixels. For the font family, let's use good old sans serif again. We don't want this to be presented as a link, so text decoration set to none. And let me add a little bit of padding on top and bottom, put the 10 pixels and 18 pixels on the left and right side. For the border, let's set it to 1 pixel solid and our default yellow color. We want a margin top 25 pixels and to float to left side. Now we also want to animate this as well, so put the animation as fade in. Animation 1 second, duration 1.8 second, delay, and set the fill-in mode as backwards. Actually the name of the animation is fade in. There you go. And I'll set the white space to no wrap. Now let's change the styles on the hover event. So on the hover, let's change the background to be our default yellow and set the color to be this dark 333. And that completes our text zone stylings. That's very nice. The next thing which we want to do is to animate our text. So every single letter needs individually to pop up once the page is loaded. And I would like to create a component for that so that we can reuse this component on every single page and we don't have to repeat this process. We will just pass in the array of the characters that we want to be animated, and this function will return the animated letters. So having that in mind, inside of the components folder, create the animated letter folder. And again, create index.js file and index.scss file. Inside of our index file, first thing that we want to do is to import our styles file, as always. Next, let's define our functional component. So give it a name, animated letters. And this component will receive 3 arguments. The first argument is going to be the class that we want to apply to our characters. The second one is going to be the array of the characters itself. And the last one is going to be the index, the starting point, which will basically set the delay of our letters and the animation. The type of the element that we want to return is going to be a span, as we want it to be an inline element, as these individual letters needs to form a letter and a word. Now let's map through the array of the letters that we received. As arguments, we get the element and the index itself. Inside of the map, we will return another span. And we want to give it a key, as every single map inside of the React needs to have a key index. So we will add a char, which is basically a letter, and an index, because we can have the repeated letters here. As a class name, we're going to pass the letter class that we received through the props. And we will add an index plus the number that is passed through the properties, which is like a starting point. So if the index is 5, every single index in the map array, it will be increased by 5. And finally, this span is going to display the letter that is passed in. And just export default animated letters. Now we can use it inside of our home component. Let's import it there. First, let's use the useState hook to define the state of our class. As letters can only have one animation at a specific moment in time, after the initial loading is done, we want to add animation on hover. So this is why we use useState. Default animation name is TextAnimate. The next, what I need to do is to create two arrays for two words that we want to animate. These arrays need to hold the characters of the separated letters that we want to animate for the animated letter component that we just created. The first array holds the characters Lobodan without the S, because S is the image that we imported. And the second array is going to hold the web developer. I need to spell it correctly so I don't make any mistakes. And for the first two words, hi, I'm manually gonna add the classes without using animated letters component. Finally, replace Slobodan word and import the animated letters component that we created. For the letter class attribute, pass in the letter class variable that we defined in the useState hook. For the string array attribute, pass in the name array, which is Slobodan, the words that we just defined on top. And for the IDX, put the 15 number. So our classes are going to start from 15 index. Let's open up the console and see does it work. If you refresh the page and inspect the letters, you can actually see that every single letter has text animate, it's a single span, and it has different index. Nice. Now let's do the same for the web developer part. Let's reuse the code that we just coded out and just replace the string array to put in the job array, and for index, set it to 22. The last thing that is done is the first two words. So like I said, I'm gonna do that manually. Add a span tag with the H letter in it for hi, and class name is going to be letter class. That is default class for animating our letters. Now we want to copy over this span and change the class. Only the first letter has just text animate class. Every next letter has a delay class as well, because we don't want these letters to appear at the same time. So we are adding the second part and the index that we're using later on to add a slight delay to animation. So the letters are appearing in a sequence. So the second letter has the delay of 12, which will be actually 1.2 seconds delay. And copy paste that over to add to two additional letters. Hi, I'm. So, and we actually need to remove this part and update the indexes to 13 and 14. As we have classes in place now, we want to add styles to them. So open index style file from the animated letters and let's add it. Default class for our text animation is TextAnimate. So set the display to inline block, as we want this to appear as a word and a sentence. The initial opacity is going to be 0, so we want them to pop up. Set the animation as a bouncy in, and duration for this animation, let it be to 1 second, and 1 second delay. As we want the letters to stay visible, set the animation fill mode to forwards, and set the minimum width to 10 pixels, so that they don't jump around. As you can see now, all the letters do appear at the same time. So what we want to do is we want to add a delay to the indexes that we created, and every single letter is going to appear one by one. We're gonna use for loop inside of the Sass. This is a great feature so that we don't have to manually code classes from 1 to 35. Use the loop and go from the indexes from 1 to 35. Inside of the loop, we are creating TextAnimate class with underscore and the index from the loop. And we're adding animation delay. Animation delay is dividing index by 10, so for every single letter we're getting 1/10 of a second. And when we refresh our page, we can see that our letters are appearing in a sequence. Beautiful animation. After animation is done, we want to add hover effects for our letters. So when we hover over effect, we get the yellow color and also we get the rubber band effect. So let's add that. Set the minimum width to 10 pixels so the text is not jumping around. Display to inline block. Animation fill mode to both. And finally, when we hover over our characters, we want to add animation rubber band 1 second and the color to be our default yellow color. Next, in the index.js file of the home folder, we can utilize this class. So we're going to use useEffect hook In the use effect, I'm going to return the set timeout, and inside of the timeout after 4 seconds, I want to set the class to text animate hover, and I will pass an empty array for dependencies, so this runs only once. And now when we hover over our text, we should get the hover effect. Let's reload the page. And for some reason, it's not appearing. If we check our index.scss file, we can actually see that we are placing text animate hover as a child of text animate. So let's just place it outside of it, and let's try again. After a couple of seconds for loading, boom, we have the hover effects. I love it. In order to complete the home page, I want to display the logo on the right side of the page and animate it using GSAP library. So let's create a separate component for it. Inside the home folder, create a logo folder, and again, create index.js file and index.scss file. And let me close all the other files. Now, inside of the index.js file, we want to import our index style file on top. Now, I will just create a dummy logo component so that we can insert that inside of our home page and continue with coding. Define a constant logo which returns only a hello text and export default logo. Now, go to home index.js file and let's import it at the bottom. And automatic import didn't work for some reason, so let's import it manually. Just type in import logo from the same folder logo. And there you go. Let's build our logo component now. Remove the hello world and insert the curly braces. Inside of the curly braces, we want to enter the return statement. In the return, we want to create a wrapper div. The name of the wrapper div is going to be logo container. In the logo container, we will have two images. One will hold the solid logo image and the other one is going to be transparent. And once the loading animation is done, we want to display the solid logo. Import the solid logo from assets, images, and the name of the file is logo-s.png. And place that in the source attribute of our image. Don't forget to add the alt attribute and put it S. And next to that, I can paste in the SVG outline S logo. And all the assets, like I mentioned, are going to be in the description box so that you can build the entirely same website as I'm building here. Now, in order to target our SVG element, inside of the SVG and the G tag, add the class name of the SVG container. All these three elements are going to be hidden as well: SVG container, SVG itself, and the solid image. So in order to manipulate with them and apply GSAP animation to it, we need to use useRef to these three elements. One reference is going to be for the background or rather container, the other one is going to be for the solid image, and the third one is going to be the outline of the logo. Now let's add some stylings to our logo so it's not overlapping with our text. First, let's style the logo container class. Reset the z-index to 0. Set the width to be 400 pixels. Set the height to be 60 pixels. Position will be absolute. Position on top of the element is going to be 0. For the position right, I will set 15%. It's looking better already. Set the bottom to be 0. Position left is going to be auto. And set the same setting for the margin as well. Next one is SVG. First, I want to set the width to be 100% of the container. Next, set the height to be automatic. Bottom position of the SVG is going to be 0. Next, I want to tilt my logo slightly on the right side. I will use transform rotate Z in order to achieve this. And the rotation value is going to be 30 degrees. I'm adding important attribute so it doesn't get overridden later on. The last piece of the puzzle here is solid logo. Set the position as absolute. The top position of the element is going to be auto. I will use the same value for the right position and also the same value for the bottom. The only different position property is going to be the left, and it will take the 0 value. Margin is also going to be automatic. Set the width to be 100% and set the opacity to be 0, as we want this solid image to appear once the logo animation is done. And again, we want to apply same rotation as we did for the outline logo. Place the rotation value as 30 degrees. If I remove the opacity for a second and the transform rotation value you can see what it does to our logo. As we want our solid logo to appear on top, set the Z index to be 1. Now, the reason why we don't see our outline logo is because we haven't set our stroke settings. Let's do that. Use the SVG container class to target the SVG element that we added. Set its stroke color to be our default yellow color. And set the stroke width to be 10 pixels. And finally, we can see it clearly. The last tile that we want to add is to set the opacity 0 to our logo container. As container, we'll have fade-in animation. Now we can switch over to our index.js file of the home component. First, add the logo container ref to our BG ref. To our image, I want to add a reference to our solid logo ref. And for the SVG path, we want to add outline logo ref. Next, in order to apply our animation effects, we will use useEffect hook. So define one on the top. For the array of the dependencies, set it as empty array, as I want this to execute only once. Library of choice for animations is GSAP, so import it from GSAP trial. And first we want to register the plugin for drawing the animation on the SVG. Next, call the GSAP timeline function that calls the animations in a sequence. Call the to function, which will represent the end state of the animation. The first argument is the element that we want to animate, so set the background ref current. As the second argument, we can set properties inside of the object. Set the duration to be 1 second, and the opacity as an endpoint to be 1. Before our function, we need to add a dot. And for the Draw SVG plugin, it didn't work for the automatic import, so we need to do it manually. So place it on top, import Draw SVG plugin from GSAP trial, Draw SVG plugin. And now when the page loads, we get the fade-in animation. Next, I want a chain animation on top of this current fade-in animation. So I will call the from function, which is similar to to, as it receives the first argument as the element that you want to animate. In our case, it's outline logo SVG. Set the draw SVG property as 0, which is a starting point, and it starts from very beginning, and duration to 20 seconds, so it's going to be a long animation. And as you can see, it creates that beautiful drawing SVG animation. When the drawing animation is done, I want to fade in the solid logo, so the logo creation animation is completely done. To achieve that, call the GSAP from to function, and as a target element, set the solid logo ref. Next attribute is the starting point of the animation, and that's opacity 0. And as a third argument is the end state of our animation, which is opacity 1. Set the delay to 4 seconds and duration to 4 seconds. And that finishes up our logo animation. So let's preview it. Let's reload the page and see the complete homepage animation. We have the nice fade in and that beautiful drawing animation. And when the drawing is done, the solid logo appears. And if we refresh again, we can see on the left side that we have the text pop-up animation. I could refresh this over and over again. Outstanding job. Let's build our next page. It's going to be an about page. So create new about folder inside of the components folder. And create again index.js file and index.scss file. Close all the other files and let's create our about component boilerplate code. Const about equals the function that returns hello. And just export default about. Now in order to use it, we need to create a new route. So inside of the app.js, duplicate the new route and set the path to be /about. And for the element, import the about component that we just created. And if we click on about link, we land on our new page. First, let's import our index.scss file. Remove the hello string, add the curly braces, and inside of our component, add the return statement. Inside, add a first div with a class name of a container and an about page. And similarly as on home page, we have another div with a class name of a text zone, where we will place our h1 tag and a paragraph. Inside of the h1 tags, we can use our animated letters component that we created for our home page. For the string array parameter, we want to pass in an array of characters. This time it's going to be about me. And for the IDX property, I want to set in 15, which actually means 1.5 seconds delay. And just update our import to be relative to the folder that we are in. And we get our text. Below this animated title, I will have 3 paragraphs. As this is about section, I will tell a little bit more about myself. And now, instead of typing all this text out and torturing you to watch it, I typed it already, so I can just copy paste it. I will copy paste 3 paragraphs, and I will just paste in the text. In the first paragraph, I say how ambitious I am. In the second one, I say how confident I am. And from the first 2, you can tell that I'm very humble, right? And the last paragraph is 1 sentence definition. Now let's add some styles to it. So open index.scss file in the layout folder, as this is going to be repeated in the context page as well. Add the very top class, about page, and inside of it, add a text zone, and this part will be very similar on the context page. Set the position as absolute. Set the left position property as 10%, so it's not behind the bar. Add the transform translate y property to -50%. But before we move it on top, we want to add a top property of 50%. Width is going to be only 35%, as we will have another elements on the right side of the page. Set the vertical align to middle, and the display property to the table cell. And additionally, max height is going to be 90%. Next, I want to target our title. I will set the font size to 53 pixels. Font family will be Helvetica. Color of our main title will be yellow, our default yellow color. Set the font weight to 400, so it's not as bold. I will reset the margin top to be 0. I will set position to be relative and margin bottom to be 40 pixels. Set the left position property to 10 pixels. And same as on the home page, we want to add h1 tags before and on the after. So I will use before and after pseudo selectors. On the before, set the content to be opening h1 tag. For the font family, again, we will use that label Aurora font. Let's decrease the font size to 18 pixels. Set the position to be absolute so that we can move it around. Margin top will have -10 pixels. Left will have the same value, -10 pixels. Set the opacity to 0.6 so it's slightly transparent. And the final style is line height 18 pixels. Let's do the similar for the after pseudo selector. Set the content to be closing h1 tag. For the font family, you probably guessed it, label Aurora. And we want to remove the space on the closing h1 tag. Let's reduce now font size to 18 pixels. And let's adjust the line height accordingly to 18 pixels as well. Again, we want to be able to move it around, so set the position to be absolute. And for the position left property, I want to set to -30 pixels. Bottom position property will be -20 pixels. Let's set margin left to be 20 pixels. And let's reduce the opacity once again to 0.6. Now let me give some style to the paragraphs. They are barely visible. Set the font to be 13 pixels. Color of the font is going to be white, so we finally see it. For the font family, use good old sans serif. And I want this text to be really thin, so set the font weight to be 300. Minimum width of the paragraphs will be fit content, and the paragraphs are going to have a popping animation. So I will set animation to pulse, and duration is going to be 1 second. But I don't like the animation where they pop up at the same time. Having that in mind, I will add a slight delay to every single one of them. I will use ends of type selector, and for the first element, I will add animation delay to 1.1 second. And when I reload the page, you can see what the animation the first paragraph has. Let's do the same for the other two. Copy paste the code that we just coded for 2 times. Update the selectors to 2 and 3, and animation delays accordingly to 1.2 seconds and 1.3 seconds. Let's reload the page to see the final result. We get this nice animation. And the last thing, let's add the class for the hover effects. The class name, same as on the home page, is text animate hover, and this time we want the color to be white because our text is by default yellow. The hover effect is not working because we need to alter the class after initial animation is done. So let's do that. As we did exactly the same thing in the home index.js file as well, let's go and copy it over. copy useState hook from index.js homepage file. This hook sets the initial value for our classes, and just import it. Next, let's copy over the useEffect hook, in which we use the setTimeout to update the classes after 4 seconds are done. Again, we need to import the useEffect hook. I'm using automatic imports. Now we can pass our letter class to the letter class attribute of the animated letters component. And now, after the animation is done, the hover effect is here. Only thing that I want to update is to set the delay to 3 seconds, as on the About page, we don't have that long loading animation at the beginning, like on the home page. And now, let's go the right part of the About page. It will be a cube with the logos of the skills that I possess, and it will be rotating. So add a div with a class name of stageCubeCont. Inside of that, create a div with a class name of CubeSpinner. CubeSpinner will hold the 6 sides of the cube with just different icons. So let's create a first one with a class name of Face1. Inside of the Face1, I will have font awesome icon, and for the first icon, I'm gonna use FA Angular. Color will be this red DD0031. Now copy paste this div 5 times. Then just update the class names to Face2, Face3, Face4, Face5, and Face6. Now update the icons. For the second one, it's going to be FA HTML5. For Face3, it's going to be FA CSS3. For the fourth one, it's going to be FA React. For the fifth one, FA JS Square for the JavaScript. For the last one, FA Git Alt for the Git. All these are imported from Fort Awesome Free Brands SVG icons. So now open the index style file for the About page, and let's add some stylings to our cube. First, let's style the stage cube container. Set the width to be 50%, so it's gonna take only the half of the page. Set the height to be 100%, and position top to be 0. I will add some padding on top, so set padding top to be 18%. Set the margin left to be 0. Position property, set it to be as an absolute. Position right property, set it to be to the maximum right, so it's a 0 value. And the last style is overflow hidden. If we check our cube now, it looks like a list of red icons, very small icons. So the next thing that I want to do is to update the colors of these icons. So open the index.js of the About page. And for the second icon, put this hash code 06529. For the third face, set the hash code to be 28A4D9. For the face 4, set it to be 5ED4F4. For the face 5, EFD81D. And the last one, EC4D28. And now every icon and every skill has their proper color. It looks much more nicer now. Next, open the style file of the About page, and let's continue with adding the styles to our cube, because right now it's just a list. So let's add the rotation animation, actually the spinning animation. Cube Spinner is going to hold this animation. So set the animation name to spin cube, and let's define this is going to be a custom animation that we are going to code. Define the animation with @keyframes, and the name is spin cube. From property is going to be empty, and 2 is going to be like a starting position. So set the transform rotate X as a 0 degrees, rotate Y also to 0 degrees, and rotate Z to 0 degrees. So like I said, this is a starting point of our animation. On the 16% of the animation, we want to transform rotate Y to -90 degrees. On 33%, we want to leave rotate Y to -90 degrees, but we will set rotate Z to 90 degrees. On the half of the animation, I will copy over the same styles, and for the rotate Y, I will update to -180 degrees, and for the rotate Z, I will leave to 90 degrees. On the 66% of the animation, I want to copy over again the same styles, and I will just update rotate Y to -270 degrees. And the last keyframe is 83%, where I will set transform rotate X to 90 degrees. Next, let's add the rest of the animation properties so that we can trigger the animation. So for the cube spinner, set the animation timing function to ease in out. This will make animation flow very smooth. Next, we want to set our cube to be spinning forever, or forever the user is on the page. So set the animation iteration count to infinite. The animation duration is going to be 12 seconds, and after that, it's going to repeat the spin over and over again. For the transform style, set the preserve 3D. For the transform origin property, set it to be 100 pixels, 100 pixels, and 0, and this will center the rotation of the animation. And for the margin left, set it calculated 50% minus 100 pixels, which is the width of our cube, so it's in the dead center of the right side. If we check our animation now, it started the rotation and the spinning, but it misses some of the styles on the cube itself, so it represents the cube and not the list. Let's add those now. Let's style the divs inside of the cube spinner, so set the position to be absolute. Set the width property to be 200 pixels and the height property to have same 200 pixels. Add the border to the divs, so set the border 1 pixel solid CCC, which is a gray color. For the background of the cubes, I want to set to transparent white, so set the background to RGBA and put the 255 value 3 times and the opacity 0.4. Next, we want to align our icons, so set the text align to center, and we want to increase the size, so set the font size to 180 pixels. To easy align it vertically, set a display to flex, and in this case actually we don't need text align setter, so set the justify content to be center for horizontal alignment, and for the vertical one set the align items to center. Also, I want our box or cube to glow, so set the box shadow to 0, 0, 20 pixels, 0 pixels, and light yellow. If we check the state of our animation right now, it looks much better. It resembles more to the cube, but we need to give it some 3D effect, so let's add that. Inside of the cube spinner, target the face 1 element. Set the transform property to translate Z to 100 pixels. We want to separate the elements into 3D space, and I'm targeting Z-axis in this case. Next, copy-paste the same code for 5 times and update the classes to target phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, phase 5, and phase 6. Now for the phase 2, set the transform rotate Y to 90 degrees and translate Z to 100 pixels. Next, for the phase 3, set the transform to rotate Y to 90 degrees, rotate X to 90 degrees as well, and translate Z to 100 pixels, same as the previous phase. For the phase 4 div, set the transform to rotate Y to 180 degrees, rotate Z to 90 degrees, and translate Z to 100 pixels. For the next phase 5 div, we want to set the transform to rotate Y to minus 90 degrees, rotate Z to 90 degrees, and translate Z to 180 pixels. And for the last one, the phase 6, copy over the phase 2 and set the rotate X to minus 90 degrees. Translate Z will be 100 pixels. And if we check our animation now, we get this beautiful cube spinning with all the skills that I have in it. That's very nice. Now let's add some loading animation for between the pages. Now when we switch between the pages, I want to show the Pacman. Let's do that first in the About page. So open up the index.js file in the About folder, add a surrounding tags. On the very bottom, import the loader component from React Loaders and set the type as a Pacman. Next, open the app.scss file. And here I will import style for our Pacman loading animation. On the top, import ~loaders.css/source/animations/pacman.scss. Now the Pacman is loaded, but it's positioned wrongly behind the bar, so let's position it correctly. Use the loader-active class to set the display to block, position as absolute. Position left will be set to 0, and the position right will have the same setting, 0. To place it in the center, set the margin to auto. Next, set the top position to 0 and bottom position to 0 as well to align it vertically. Set the width property to be 50 pixels and also height property will be 50 pixels as well. And the Pacman now has correct size and the placement. Let's give it a fade in animation. So set the animation property to fade out, duration 1 second and delay 1 second. Animation fill mode to forwards. And now when we reload the page, we get this Pacman loading animation which fades out. That's very nice. Let's add it on the home page as well. So this time open index.js file in the home folder. And again, add a wrapping div. And on the very bottom, again import the loader component from the React loaders and set the type as a Pacman. And that should do it. Let's preview. And now when we reload the page, we can see that we get the Pacman loading animation. And also switching between the pages, about and a home page, we also get the animation. I like that. Now the last thing on our portfolio website that is left to be done is our contact page. So let's build that next. Close all the files that we opened. In the components folder, create contact folder. In this folder, and you know the pattern already, create index.js file and index.scss file. In the index.js file, let's first import our style file on very top. And let me create a boilerplate code for a functional component. So constant contact equals to a function which returns hello. And at the very bottom, export default contact. Now we need to create a new route. So inside of the app.js file, duplicate the about route and just update. Set the path attribute to be contact and element to be contact. Now we can go back to index component and let's remove this string, add a curly braces and a return statement. In the contact page, same as on the other two, we will have surrounding tags and we will have two divs, actually one div and one loader. For the div, add a class name of a container and contact dash page. Underneath, add the loader from React loaders and again set the type to a Pacman. On the contacts page, on the left side, I will have text zone on top and below that there will be a form, contact form. And on the right side of the page, we will have a map with the location of where I live. Let's add the animating text on top first. So add a div with a class name of text-zone. Inside, similarly like on other pages, add a h1 tag. And inside of this tag, we will use animated letters component that we created previously. So it's now really easy to animate the titles that we use on our pages. Automated import didn't work for some reason, so I will manually import it. So import animated letters from the folder above, animated letters. The first property that we need to pass in is string array. On this page, I want to display contact me. So I'm passing as an array of characters, contact me. Make sure to put the correct spelling and make sure to add the space in between the words. For the index start property, let's put 15, which means 1.5 seconds delay of the animation. For altering the animation class when initial loading is done, we will use again the same code that we coded on the about and on the home page. So let's just copy it over. And now I'm just using automatic import to import the useState hook and useEffect hook. Now we can use the letter class property that we just created and pass into our animated letters component. And just like that, we have our title animated, but we just need to give it some styles to position it better and to make it more visible. As we already added text styles for the about page, similarly like the one we have on the contact page, I will go to the layout styles and just add contact page. And if we reload our page, we can see that the title is done and animated. So our development is getting faster and faster as we have done the setup right. Let's add some description below. Add a paragraph tag, and once again I will just copy paste in the text and you don't have to suffer watching me typing that out. If we reload the page, we can see that both of these are animated already. Now let's build a contact form. After the paragraph, add a div with a class name of contact form. Inside of the div, add a form, and inside of the form, add an ordered list. First list item will have the class name of the half, which only will take the half of the row. And inside of this list item, I will place the input element. Type will be text, name attribute will be name, placeholder will be name as well, and it will be required. And we got our first field. Now let's copy over this list item and paste it. And let's adjust the input to be email, name also email, and placeholder also email. And leave it as required. The next input will be for subject. So this list item will take full row width. So we are not adding class name of half. Set the placeholder to subject, type to text, name to subject as well, and this one will be required also. The next list item will hold the message input, and I will be using text area for it. Set the placeholder of the text area as a message. And looks like that I have a typo here. Set the input as a lowercase. Add a name attribute to the text area. Let it be message and set it required. And the last list item in our form will be a submit input. So set a type as a submit. And add a class name of a flat dash button. And set the value of it to send. JSX part is done. Let's add some styles. First, let's target contact form. Set the width to be 100% and margin top to 20 pixels. For the unordered list, set the padding to be 0. And for the margin, use the same value. For the list items as well, reset the padding to be 0 and set the margin to be 0 as well. We don't want any bullet points, so list style set to none and set the margin bottom to 10 pixels. Overflow will be hidden, display mode as block, position is relative, and we want opacity to be 0 as I want this to fade in as all other elements that we have on this page. And I will set animation to fade in up, 2 seconds animation and 2 seconds delay. As I want elements to stay on the page, set the animation fill mode to forwards. And let's preview our fade in animation. That looks very nice. Let's continue with styling the input elements. First, for the li half element, set the width to be 49%. And let's add some small space on the left side. So margin left, set it to be 2%. Set the floating style to be left. And just to mention, here I'm refactoring my code from like 7 or 8 years ago. So this is why I use the floats. These days I use display flex mostly. Add the clear both to li element. And for the half, add the clear none, as I want it to be inline with the other half. And set the first child of it to have the margin left a 0. So we want only the second child to have the margin in the space on the left. Next, I want to target input type text and input type email, as they don't have any visual differences, only functional ones. For both of these elements, set the width to be full 100%. And let's remove the borders, so put the border as 0. Background of our input elements is going to be this dark blue, 115173 hash code. Let's increase the size of the elements, so put the height to be 50 pixels. Set the font size to be 16 pixels. Color needs to have a contrast to this dark background, so set it to be white, FFF. Let's remove the padding on top and the bottom, so set the padding 0 and on the left and the right side, let it be 20 pixels. To keep the same width and height of the element, set the box sizing to border box. The next element on the list is text area, which will have the similar styles like the previous elements and the inputs. Set the maximum width to 100%. Remove the border so value is 0. The background is going to be this dark blue, the same one as we used on the previous inputs. Height 50 pixels, font size 16 pixels. Again, I want contrast for the color and the background, so set the color to be white, FFF. Padding this time 20 pixels on all 4 sizes. Minimum height will be 150 pixels. This is the largest element as it holds the biggest value. And to retain his size, set the box sizing to border box. And the last element is our send button, which is not the least definitely. Use the flat dash button CSS selector and set the first style of the color to our default yellow, FFD700. Background to 00. Font size to 11 pixels. I want these letters to be spread a little bit, so set the letter spacing to 3 pixels. There will be no text decoration, so set it to none. Padding on top and bottom is 8 pixels, and on the left and the right side is 10 pixels. And let's add the border, so set the border to 1 pixel solid and our default yellow color, FFD700. Float it to left side, add a little bit of border radius. I'll set to 4 pixels. Update the float actually to go to the right side. And our form is done. Now let's make it work. For the implementation of our code, I will be using the email.js library. The link to this library will be in the description, and you need to go there and create an account. Once you do that, you will get this initialization code, which you can paste inside of the body tags. Only the token will be different, obviously. Once we finished initializing our email.js library, we can get back to our contact index.js file. First, we need to get a reference from our form. So create a const ref form, which equals to useRefHook. Now we can pass in these values to the ref attribute of our form. So set the ref to the ref form and call the onSubmit method. In the onSubmit event handler, I will call sendEmail function that we will create just in a minute. So before the return statement, add a const sendEmail, and as a parameter, it receives an event. I want to stop default submitting, so call the ePreventDefault method. In this method, we will use our email.js library. So let's import it on top. Import email.js from @email.js/browser. On the email.js object, call the sendForm function. This function, as a first argument, receives service ID. In this case, it's a Gmail. As a second argument, it receives a template ID. And this template ID you get from your account once you created the account and when you create a template. The third argument is the form reference. And the fourth one is user token, which you get upon registration. Once again, link to this library will be in the description below. And after our email has been successfully sent, we want to send a message to the user. So the easiest way to do that is to use window alert. And what we can do else is to reload our page so that our form is resetted. So call the window location reload and pass the argument as false. But in case we fail to send the message, again, notify the user that operation failed and they need to try again. And now we can test it. Only thing that I forgot to add is to call the useRefHook. And now we can go to our form and test it out. I will just enter some random values for the testing. But as you can see, it has browser validation in place. Input the valid email format and fill in all the required fields in order to be able to send it. And when all that is said and done, we get the confirmation message that it has been successfully sent. But let's check my Gmail inbox. And when I open my email, I can see that I received a message from email.js. And as you can see, subject and email are there, but actually we are missing the message itself. So let's check our form. And yes, looks like that we had a typo. So type in message correctly and let's try again. Again, fill in all the dummy text. So put test name, test email, so this needs to be a correct format, text subject and text message, and submit it. Once again, we get the confirmation and let's open our email. And this time we get the message as well. And that's how you can create a form without need for a backend server. You just need an email.js library in order to do this. Let's continue. On the right side of our contact page, I want to display a map with the position and the location where I live in. For this purpose, I'm using Leaflet Maps. We already installed the package. I just need to import the styles inside of the index file. Once again, you will be able to find the link to this library in the description. Close the index.html file and get back to index.js in the contacts folder. Before we add a map, I want to add a little box on top with the information about my location. So after the text zone, add a div with a class name of info-map. Inside of this div, let's add some text. I'm putting my first name and my last name. And I'm adding a break. After that, I put the name of the country where I live in. After that, I will put some random street name with random number. After that, add another break tag. And after that, I will place a name of the town where I live in. Another break, and I will add a span. In this span, I will add my real email address in case somebody wants to contact me directly. Next, let's add some styles to our info top. Use the info map CSS selector. Set the position of this box as absolute. Background color will be completely black, so 000. Set the position top to 50 pixels. Position right will be 30%. This is going to be a little bit off from the center. And this box will be on top of everything, so set the Z index to 999999. Width will be 267 pixels. Set the padding to be 20 pixels on all four sides. To make the complete contrast, set the color to be white, so FFF. For the font family, I will use Helvetica. And for the font size, set it to 17 pixels. I want font weight to be slightly thinner, so set the font weight to 300. This box will also have fade-in animation, so set the initial opacity to 0. And set the animation itself to fade in. Duration 1 second and delay 1.5 seconds. As I want this box to remain visible, set the animation fill mode to forwards. And the last thing which I want to style in this box is our span, which holds my email. So set the font size to slightly lower, 16 pixels. Set the display as block. As I want some separation on the very top, add a padding top to 20 pixels. In order my email to stand out, I will change the color to be our default yellow, FFD700. And let's see what we got. And that's exactly what I needed. So let's add the map itself. Next to the info map, add a div with a class name of map wrap. So this is a wrapper for our map. Next, open our index style file and add some of the styles to a map wrapper. First, set the background property to RGBA 8, 253, 216 and opacity 0.1. This wrapper is going to be on the right side, so set the float to the right. Set the width to 53% and height to 100%. And we have our container now with this greenish color. We have already installed the leaflet package, but we need to add some styles to our index.html file. Links to the package and the instructions how to install it, again, will be in the description. Again, open the index.js file in the contact folder. In the map wrap, add the map container component from the React leaflet library. In the center attribute, you will pass in the coordinates where you want your map to have the center. And for the zoom attribute, you will pass in the level of zoom you want to be applied by default. In the map container, add a tile layer component with the following URL: https:// in curly braces s.tile.openstreetmap.org / in curly braces z / in curly braces x / in curly braces y.png. This tile component is the actual map component. Next to the tile layer, I will add a marker component. And all this component you are importing from React leaflet. I will add a position attribute, and it will have the same coordinates as the center. Inside of a marker, let's add a pop-up. And inside of this pop-up, let's add some message for the visitors. Sloba lives here, come over for a cup of coffee. And smiley. Now we need to add some styles in order to see our map and to make it visible. So in the style file of our contact page, add a leaflet container class. Set the width property to 100% and the height property as well to the same value, 100%. Set the position to relative. Once again, we want this element to fade in, so set the opacity to 0. And now let's set the animation. Animation will be back in right and duration will be 1 second. Delay 1.2 seconds. And as we want our map to stay on the page, set the animation fill mode to forwards. And that should be the last style that we applied on our website. Let's see our results. And now as you can see, inside of the container, we have our map. There's a pin drop with this pop-up message. And the center of the map is my hometown. And when we reload the page, we can see that fade in right animation on the map. And to sum up what we have accomplished in this hour and a half. So we built our home page, where we should impress people with our drawing SVG animations and this popping up text animation. We added a Pacman animation to make the page switching more interesting. And on the about page, we can impress people with this custom-made CSS rotating animation. And the last, on the contact page, we added this interactive map. And on the left side, we created and implemented this beautiful form. I wanted to make this tutorial short, so I created only 3 pages. But this tutorial could be extended to add portfolio page and maybe optimize it to mobile devices. And if you would like to see the second part of this tutorial, please let me know in the comments. And also please check my channel for other tutorials like this one. And I spent a ton of time to make these tutorials for you guys, so please spend a couple of seconds to subscribe and like my video. And I see you guys in the next one.